you've just heard is the national anthem of Tanzania, sung by Tanzanian singers in the Tanzanian language of Swahili. Habari! That means hello in Swahili. Today, I plan to talk to you about not only the history of Tanzania, but also problems that the multiple languages represented in the country, have caused, as well as dimensions proposed by Hofstede about Tanzania regarding individualism, power distance, and uncertainty avoidance. So to begin, Tanzania has a very interesting history. It was founded by the Portuguese in the early 1500s and was ruled over by many nations before finally becoming independent in the late 1900s. So it's a fairly new country. The country was originally referred to as Zanzibar, and the British and the German governments gained authority over Zanzibar. After the country gained independence from British rule, it was known as Tanganyika. This was the native name that the people gave to their country once they started on their road to becoming independent. Tanganyika then becomes independent and progresses to a republic with Julius Nyerere as president, when it then came to be known as the country we all know today as Tanzania. So as I mentioned earlier in the video, I said that there are multiple languages represented in Tanzania. Now, multiple actually means 120. Because there are 120 different tribes in Tanzania, there are also 120 different languages. So as you can see, this posed a problem in coming up with a national language for the country. The country eventually decided on a national language that is now represented as the official language of Tanzania. So Swahili was chosen, which is widely spoken by the nation, but also not taught specifically to children when they're growing up. They actually learn English when they grow up. So though Swahili is the official language of the nation, it is not taught into schools until high school. After learning the colonial language of English, then students begin to consistently use their native tongue. Now, this is a controversial practice, and many researchers have addressed it, saying that students should be educated about their cultural background in their own language. One researcher, specifically Dr. Denes Maganda, she speaks on this in her article, Conflicted Worlds of Multilingual Communities in Africa, saying that educators should be encouraged to consider students' language ideology based on historical, economic, and social contexts. So when I was doing my research about this, I basically learned that not only do Americans consider it to be interesting that Swahili is the national language, but the students are taught English in school, they're actually, the native people there are also kind of confused about it because there's a lot of languages that are still spoken in the smaller tribes of Tanzania. So talking about those smaller tribes, I actually wanted to emphasize some of Hofstede's dimensions that relate to Tanzania. So one of those is the individualism versus collectivism dimension. So for Tanzania, not surprisingly, they're a very collectivist culture. So they score a 25 on individualism, which means that family members have a very high priority in this society. Family members depend on each other as well as other outside groups that are part of their extended family to support them. So not everyone lives with an extended family, but they at least support them in some way. One responder actually said that it's necessary to take care of each other because life is difficult, and they felt an obligation to help. So the native people of Tanzania believe that collectivism is not really an obligation, but like a duty. like a duty that they have to serve for their community. So individualism is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that collectivism is valued much more highly. Another dimension noted by Hofstede is power distance. This dimension can be broken up into two separate sections of business and education. So in the business realm, companies have a large hierarchical structure. However, they're not too dependent on their bosses. Employees participate in discussions in the company. So Tanzania scores a 70, which means that they're very high on power distance. But this doesn't mean that the authority, rules everything. Basically, this means that people in Tanzania respect their authority, but they're also allowed to work together with the authority, especially in business settings. So another setting of power distance is education. So teachers are dictatorial, they're highly respected, and they're esteemed. Students are focused and primarily listen to the teacher rather than attempt to voice their own thoughts or opinions. For the most part, the education system is very, very based on authority. So they want to instill this idea that, there is a hierarchical order very early in children's lives, and then as they grow up and become their own independent person, then they learn when they can speak and when they cannot speak, which is basically just a comment on, how much the society values rules, or just ideas about the way that people should live. So in regards to those things, the last element that Hofstede mentions that relates to Tanzania is uncertainty avoidance. So these are basically the country's desire to follow rules. Do they like uncertainty? Do they like to, hang out and have fun and not really care about what time it is? Or are they more concerned about showing up and being responsible, showing up on time, making sure that everything gets done in the proper way? So my studies on this found that it's a 50. They score 50 on uncertainty avoidance, which means that they are sort of comfortable with uncertainty, but they also don't really like it that much. So this means that rules are made for the company and overall society's best interest. So rules are important, but they're not everything. So the Tanzanians are fine with some uncertainty, but there is a limit. For example, they enjoy uncertainty in relation to their religion or, the way that they talk about nature. They really don't mind storms. They add significance to those things. They like talking about them. But they do mind, people being late to a meeting or, just not showing up at all because they couldn't or, whatever it is. So that is a little bit about Tanzania. Overall, it's a fantastic country with great, friendly people. My takeaways for this speech are that when you're speaking with Tanzanian people, just be open. Be open to whatever energy they're giving to you. Some Tanzanians are much more reserved. They're much more rule followers. They really enjoy the standards of society, whereas others are much more open. They want to invite you into their homes. They want to feed you. They want to show you their family and show you around their little tribe. But that's really the most thing. That's the most important thing to keep in mind is that these people are friendly and they want to talk to you, and you just have to kind of feel out what energy they're giving off to you, and then you will have a better communication practice with them. So thank you so much for listening to this presentation. Shikamo. Goodbye.